Well, good afternoon. Today we're going to discuss the next chapter, which is process costing. Well, in the previous chapter, chapter 17, we discussed that there are two major costing methods used in managerial accounting. The first one is the one discussed in the previous chapter. It is job order costing. And today we're going to learn how do we use process costing in managerial accounting to do the cost controls. Well, first of all, let's recall what's the difference between job order costing and process costing. In the previous chapter, you learned that the companies like the Smart Touch Learning, which is a fictitious company that we use to illustrate job order costing. This company manufactures touchscreen tablets that are preloaded with e-learning software. And the company uses a job order costing system to determine the cost of its custom goods and services. Job order costing is appropriate for companies that manufacture batches of unique products or provide specialized services. Other examples of companies that use job order costing include accounting firms, building contractors, and custom furniture manufacturers, etc., etc. And in contrast, other companies use a series of steps, which are called processes, to make large quantities of similar products. Examples of such companies include soft drink bottles, paint manufacturers, and gasoline refiners. These companies use a process costing. Well, actually, there are two methods of handling process costing. They are weighted average and first in, first out, which is known as FIFO. But this chapter focuses on the weighted average method. The use of FIFO is out of the scope of this class. But you can learn FIFO in the appendix of this textbook. Well, here are the learning objectives. First of all, we need to describe the flow of cost through a process costing system. And secondly, which is the most important concept in this chapter, we need to know what is equivalent units of production, or EUPs, equivalent units of production, for direct materials and conversion cost. Well, here let's do a quick recap of what is learned in the very first class. Well, in the very first class, we learned the classification of the cost. And one way to classify the cost is to classify the cost into prime cost and conversion cost. Here in chapter 18, we primarily focus on direct materials plus conversion cost, where conversion costs include direct labors and manufacturing overhead. We use this classification, direct materials plus conversion costs, in this chapter. While you learn what is EUP, equivalent units of products, you need to understand how to prepare a production cost report for the first department. And you need to know how to prepare the production cost report for the subsequent departments, both using weighted average methods. And you need to know how to prepare the journal entries for the process costing. And lastly, how to use a production cost report to make decisions. Okay. First of all, let's get to know what is the difference and commons between job order costing and process costing. Well, both job order costing and process costing system track the product cost of direct material, direct labor, and manufacturing overheads through 3 inventory accounts on the balance sheet. They are, as you can recall, they are raw material inventories, work in process inventories, and finished goods inventories. When the products are sold, both systems transfer the product cost to COGS, cost of goods sold. This is an expense account on the income statement. Well, the primary differences between job order costing and process costing are how and when costs are recorded in WIP inventory, work in process inventory. Job order costing has one WIP inventory account with subsidiary ledger containing individual job costs recorded for each job. Costs are transferred to finished goods inventory when the jobs are completed, while process costing has a separate WIP inventory account for each process. A production cost report is completed for each process or department. So this slide summarizes the differences between job order costing and process costing. Well, to gain an understanding of the process costing, in this chapter, we will use another fictitious company called Puzzle Me which is a company that manufactures the jigsaw puzzles. It divides its manufacturing operations into two processes. As you can see, the first process, assembly process. The first process, assembly process. In this department, it applies the glue to cardboard and then presses a picture onto the cardboard. The second department, which is the cutting department or cutting process. The cutting process cuts the cardboard into puzzle pieces and packages the puzzles in the box. Then the box is moved to the finished goods storage. The jigsaw puzzles accumulate production costs during each process. The company then assigns its costs to puzzle passing through that process. So let's suppose the company's production cost incurred to make 50,000 puzzles, and the costs per puzzle are as follows. For assembly process, the total cost is 220,000. So divided by 50,000, we know the cost per unit is $4.40. Well, regarding to cutting process, the total cost is 45,000 divided by 50,000 puzzles. We know the cost per unit is 90 cents. So together, the cost per unit in assembly process plus the cost per unit in cutting process, we got the final cost per unit. Well, the companies use process costing to determine the per unit cost in order to, first of all, control the cost. The company can look for ways to cut the cost when actual process costs are more than the planned process cost. And the second purpose is to set sales price. The company wants the sales price to cover the cost of making the puzzles. And the company also wants to earn a profit. The third purpose is to calculate account balances. Well, the company needs to know the ending balance in WIP inventory accounts and finished goods inventory accounts for the balance sheets, as well as COGS. COGS accounts for income statements. Okay, this slide compares the cost flows in the job order costing and process costing. Well, in the previous chapter, as you can see, in panel A, we use a job order costing system. And now let's focus on panel B. And as you can see, there are two WIP inventory accounts in each different department in Puzzle Me company. The first account appears here in assembly department, and the second WIP inventory account appears here in cutting process. Well, while we learn this chapter, we have some basic assumptions. First, each process is a separate department, and each department has its own WIP inventory account. Second, direct material, direct labor, and manufacturing overheads are assigned to WIP inventory for each process that uses them. Third, when the assembly department's process is complete, the units moves out of the assembly department and goes into the cutting department. The assembly department's costs are also transferred out of the assembly department's WIP inventory to WIP inventory account in cutting department. Number 4, when the cutting department's process is complete, the boxes of puzzles go into finished goods storage. The combined cost for both departments flow into finished goods inventories. And finally, the total cost for the puzzles includes the cost of assembly and cutting these two departments. The costs incurred in the first process are transferred to the second process. The costs incurred in the first process and second process are then transferred into finished goods inventory directly. And as you know, when the puzzles are sold, these costs are transferred from finished goods inventory account to COGS, cost of goods sold. Well, next, let's get to know what is equivalent units of production, which is a crucial concept that you have to understand in order to make the production cost report for each process. The production process takes time, so companies may have products that are not completed and still in process at the end of a counting period. So in process costing, production costs are accumulated by process. At the end of the period, the total production costs incurred in this process must be split between two categories. First, the units have been completed in that process. And second, the units not completed and remaining in working process inventory for that department. Okay, this slide shows this concept. And as you can see, the total costs incurred during the periods in Department 1 can be split into two categories. First, the costs, the units completed and can be transferred out to the next department. And the second part, well, this is the first part. And the second part is costs remaining in Department 1, which are the units not completed. So here, the concept of equivalent units of production allows the business to measure the direct material, direct labor, and manufacturing overheads incurred on a partially finished group of units during the period, and to express it in terms of fully complete units of output. So let's go back for one slide. EUP, equivalent units of products, is the concept regarding to this part. To those units not completed in one process. So to better understand EUP, let's consider this example. A young boy is helping his father in the garden by carrying buckets of waters for the plants. But the boy is small and the bucket is heavy. So the father only fills the bucket half full. At the end of the day, the boy tells his mother that he carried 6 buckets of water. While he may have made 6 trips, but he only carried equivalent of 3 buckets of water. Because, as I said, his father filled the boy's buckets half full. So 6 buckets on that boy is equivalent of 3 buckets that are completely full. So this example illustrates an important point, the concept of equivalent units of products. And also, the equivalent units of products can be different for direct materials and conversion costs. And it is calculated separately. Okay, so let's assume that Puzzle Company has 40,000 units that the assembly department completed and transferred out. Therefore, the equivalent units would be 40,000 units for both direct materials and conversion costs. Well, that's straightforward because these units in the first departments are completed and transferred out. It's like the fully filled buckets because it's fully completed. So these 40,000 units are considered 40,000 units for both direct materials and conversion costs. Well, next, let's see. Let's assume the company also has 10,000 units in ending WIP inventory that are 100% complete with respect to direct materials, but only 25% completed with respect to conversion cost. So here are the differences. We split these two parts. First one is direct material and second part is conversion cost. Well, first of all, regarding to direct material cost is also pretty much straightforward because they are 100% complete. So we use 10,000 units times 100%. We get 10,000 equivalent units of production for direct materials. But next, regarding to conversion costs, it is only 25% completed with respect to conversion costs. So here, we use 10,000 units in WIP inventory count times 25% to get 2,500 EUP, equivalent units of production, for conversion cost. So this is the concept of EUP, equivalent units of products. Well, so far so good. Any questions before I move ahead? You have to understand equivalent of units, the concept of equivalent units of production completely so that you can move ahead into next part. Let me know if you have any questions. No? Okay, good job. So Next, let's see how to prepare a production cost report for the first department using weighted average methods. For a comprehensive example of process costing system, let's continue using our example, which is the fictitious company Puzzle Me. Well, again, I would like to repeat the processes within this company. First of all, 3 parts of cost. They are direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing. Overhead. First of all, the total cost flows into the first department. The first department is assembly department. Well, this department applies glue to the cardboard and then presses a picture onto the cardboard. After the first department, the cost flows to the second department, which is cutting department. Second department, cutting department. Well, the cutting department cuts the cardboard into puzzle pieces and packages the puzzles in a box. The production process uses materials, machines, and labor in both departments, and there are 2 WIP inventory counts, one for assembly department and another one for cutting department. Okay, now let's get to know deeper about a production cost report. A production cost report must be completed for each department. The production cost reports show the calculation for physical flows and the cost flows of the department. Well, basically, there are 4 steps to preparing a production cost report. As I said, there are 2 parts in the production cost report. The first part regards to physical flows, and the second part is about cost flows. So, regarding to these, let me use another color. Again, the first part is about physical flows, and the second part is about cost flows. So, regarding to physical flows, we first of all need to summarize the flow of physical units, and then complete output in terms of EUP, equivalent units of production. So in other words, the first two steps in preparing a production cost report is about the physical flows. And thirdly, the third step and the fourth step is all about cost flows. The third step is to compute the cost per equivalent unit of product. And finally, in the production cost report, we assign costs to units completed and units in process. Okay, there's another thing that you need to understand. Two unique terms are used in the production cost reports: to account for and accounted for. Well, to account for includes amount in process at the beginning of the period, plus the amount started or added during the process. First, well, the amount in process at the beginning of this period, as you learned in financial accounting class, is equivalent to the amount in process at the end of the previous accounting periods. These two figures are equivalent. Well, the first part in to account for is the amount in process at the beginning of the period plus the amount started or added during the process. This is to account for, while for accounted for shows what happened to the amount to account for. They are either still in process or completed and transferred out. Also, two parts: the amount in process plus the amount completed. So let's see an example in this company. Well, you need to remember that these terms are used for both units and costs. And to account for and accounted for must always be equal. So to illustrate these terms, let's prepare a production cost report for Pasme, a company's first department or first process, which is assembly department. Okay, assembly process applies glue to the cardboard and then press a picture onto the cardboard. Operations for this department include two inputs. First, the assembly department's direct material are added to the beginning of the process. And secondly, the assembly department's conversion costs are added evenly through the process. Well, here is an important word, as you can see in the description. For direct materials, they are added right at the beginning of the process. While for conversion cost, they are added evenly throughout the process. So my next question for you is, how much is the question marks? How much is it? The question marks stand for the ending units of WIP. Well, and as I said in the previous slide, we learned to account for and accounted for. Well, I also say that to account for and account for must always be equal. So here in this chart, first of all, we can know how many units are to account for. Again, to account for includes amount in process at the beginning of the period, plus the amount started or added during the period. So, beginning, the units in the beginning is 8,000 plus the units started in production in this period, which is 42,000. So 8,000 plus 42,000 equals to the units to account for. To account for. Well, for accounted for is either still in process units or completed and transferred out units. Well, in this accounting period, we know the transferred out is 40,000 units. 40,000 units plus the question marks equals to 50,000 units, or to account for. So the numbers must marked in blue. 40,000 plus question marks should equal to 50,000. So the numbers marked in blue are the units accounted for. So question marks equals to 10,000. And as I said, these terms are used for both units, physical units, and costs. So if you look at the cost part, it also applies. That's to account for and accounted for are equal. Well, let's get started to summarize to prepare for the production cost report. As you can recall, the first step is to summarize the flow of physical unit. The physical units are the actual units that the company will account for during the period. Let's assume the assembly department has 8,000 units in process on July 1 and started 42 units during the month. So this slide shows the first step on production cost report. The first part in the first process, in the first step, you need to account units to account for listed here, and units accounted for listed here. Well, as you can see, the total units are equal. 50,000 here and 50,000 here. Okay, it is pretty much straightforward, right? This is the first step. Okay, next, let's see how to do the second step. The second step is to compute outputs in terms of equivalent units of production. And we divide the cost into two parts: direct materials and conversion costs. Why? If you can remember these slides, well, in this slide, for the direct materials, because it is added at the beginning of the production process, for direct materials, it is fully completed in regarding to EUP. While the conversion cost is added evenly during the process. So here, we need to look at the cost into two parts: direct materials plus conversion cost. Well, For the completed parts, it is pretty much straightforward. For the completed units, since they are fully completed, so either direct material or regarding to either direct material or conversion cost, they are 100% completed. So for completed units, there are 40 completed units. 40,000 completed units times 100% equals to 40,000 EUPs for direct materials. And for WIP units, same thing. We have 10,000 units times 100% equals to 10,000 EUPs for direct materials. Well, but here, for conversion cost, first of all, let's see the completed units. Since they are completed, they are fully completed regarding to the first process, we still times 100%. But as I said, for the conversion cost, since they are evenly added in the production line, for the uncompleted units, we use 25% to calculate the EUPs. So for completed units, as I said, we still times 100%, we get 40,000 EUPs for conversion cost. But for the incompleted units or the in-process units, physically, we have 10,000 units. But to calculate the EUPs, we times only 25%. We get 2,500 EUPs for conversion cost. So here is the second step to calculate the EUPs. Well, the first two steps, step 1 and step 2, as I said, is about the physical, the units, either physical units or equivalent units of production. Well, for the next step, step 3. Step 3 and step 4 are about the cost, the money. The assembly department has to account for costs associated with the following. First, work done last month on the 8,000 partially completed units. Work done this month to complete the 8,000 partially completed units. Work done this month on the 42,000 units that were started into production. We will use weighted average to account for costs. The weighted average combines the beginning WIP cost and the cost added during the period into one cost pool, as you learned in financial accounting class. Well, a cost pool is a accumulation of individual costs. The total cost to be accounted for includes direct materials and conversion costs and will be calculated as beginning working process costs plus costs added during the period. Well, to calculate the cost per equivalent unit of production, we simply divide total cost by EUPs, the units of EUPs. And calculations are required for both direct materials and conversion cost. So as we can see, the total cost for direct materials is 140,000, and for conversion cost, total cost to account for is 68,000. So here is the calculation. Cost per EUP for direct materials, we use 140,000 divided by 50,000 EUPs. We get $2.80 per EUP regarding to direct materials. But for conversion cost, well, here is an error in the PowerPoint slide. Here's an error. The number of EUPs is incorrect. It should be 2,500 EUPs in regarding to conversion cost. The total cost for direct material cost is 68,000 divided by EUP, which is 2,500. We get 1 cent, $1.60. Okay. The part marked in blue is the third step, what we do in the third step. Oh, I'm sorry. So my mistake. So I mean, The slide is correct. The slide is correct. The slide is correct. You don't need to make changes here. It is $1.60. I mean the EUP for conversion cost. 42,500. Well, this is the third step to calculate the unit cost. And the last step, to assign the cost to units completed and units in process. The cost must be divided into two outputs. The first part is the completed part. It shows the completed units. And the second part, as I said, we need to calculate the units still in process, or the partially completed units remaining in the first department's ending WIP inventory account. Well, the last step is calculated as follows. We use the result in step 3, the unit cost. The unit cost calculated in step 3 times the EUPs. Regarding to direct materials, the unit cost per EUP is $2.80. And regarding to conversion cost, the unit cost per EUP is calculated at $1.60. And each timed with completed EUPs and in process EUPs, we get this result to be filled in production cost report as the last step. Okay, in today's class, we learned how to prepare the production cost reports in the first process or the first department of a manufacturing company. And in the next class, we will learn how to prepare the production cost report for the subsequent departments using weighted average method. All right, guys, thank you for attending my online class. And let me know if you have any questions before you leave.